All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Sorry, we are literally a few minutes late. I had myself booked very full today. I had to run a piece of equipment back up to a friend of mine we share it with, and then I had to run to a local community function, and now we are here. So thanks everyone so much for hanging out with us. And Troy, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
So, Troy, talk to us a little bit about your background. How did you get into the farming space?
Yeah, it's a unique story to hear because it didn't start off in farming or agriculture. Actually, I spent 10 years in a corporate insurance company where I was a lean certified green belt working on strategy programs. But one thing that I really cared about, or my wife and I care about, is local farming and healthy food. And so the spark for the inspiration of Farm Brigge and then lean in farming came from us just wanting to teach ourselves more education around local farming and local food systems, but also teach our kids that. And so we saw the struggle with our kids not wanting to eat certain foods and always wanting to eat the snacks and the sugary foods and everything. And we see that in schools too. So we really wanted to do something. And so we just started inserting ourselves into the community. I would drive out to farms, as many as that would have me, sit down at their kitchen tables, walk the farm, and just ask them questions, learn about how we could help. That led to the launch of an online farmers market model in the state of Michigan last year. But then behind the scenes, we were helping farms with lean farming. We were helping them with their operational processes. We were dabbling in things that we knew a little about, like online stores and digital marketing. We're better at it now. But what we did is we built a resource log and then ultimately launched a brand new marketplace platform that not only includes lean farming, but allows farms to list their profiles, share information for consumers in a database functionality, and then a whole bunch of other tools, including growing farmers access point on their dashboard. And so it's meant to be a supportive marketplace. And we look forward to helping out the farming community as much as we can.
Very cool. So I'm sure a lot of people aren't, they probably heard of lean, but they're not sure that it relates to their farm. Talk to us a little bit about why every farm needs to be thinking about lean.
Yeah, so lean in farming, like you mentioned, is not a brand new thing. There are some resources out there. So if you're familiar with Ben Hartman's work in Clay Bottom Farms, he even wrote a book around the lean farm where he brought in a certified coach and they retooled his entire farm with lean principles. And so it's out there. He's got some great courses and resources too. But what we wanted to do was get better in the space of going out there and analyzing the farm from a business perspective and seeing where we could insert Toyota's lean manufacturing principles. And so where those principles come into play is you start to think about every area of waste around the farm, whether that's the design of the farm, the processes of the farm, the overproduction of a farm. It could be as easy as standard operating procedures, training of farm workers. And so I took what I had learned in the insurance industry when we applied it there. So I had the opportunity to lead Kaizen events, which are little mini events where I would go on to organizations or groups, and then we would lead these little mini events to build and break down processes and improve them, and then build a sustainable model for the future. And so we started doing that with farms last year. I would go out to the farm. We would create a project charter of the things that they wanted to improve on the farm. We would suggest some ideas by doing observations. And then we would take their team through training around what lean thinking means, how they can think about it every day, how they can go through 5S, root cause analysis, process maps, build visual aid tools and things like that. And then ultimately leave the farm with them feeling like they're supported, and then they can operate with a lean thinking in mind. Everybody on the farm is thinking the same thing, and it's continuous improvement every day.
All right, so something you said there, you said visual cues. Talk to us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. So many farms today, especially if you have a team that you manage or you lead, you have standard operating procedures. Like how do you harvest something? How do you manage the greenhouse? And so another way of doing that is to break that down into visual aids. And so what we do is not only help farms that develop standard operating procedures, they don't have them today, but if they do have them, we repurpose that into a visual tool where you can actually laminate a card and you either place it out in the area on the farm, or you keep it right there in the barn somewhere where people can access it easily. It makes it very useful, especially if you have people coming in and out. Let's say you run a work share program where you allow CSA members to come in and help you on the farm, or you allow volunteer help from the community. Instead of trying to retrain, teach people, and do all that every single day, you create these visual cues that they can take out there, and it literally shows them what a harvest should look like when they get done bundling it, how they put the rubber bands on their wrist and they walk the fields. And so it's a truly valuable visual tool to help you build efficiencies on the farm.
And break down a little bit about a standard operating procedure, because I think that's new for some of the folks too. Is what does that mean, and how is that going to help them farm better?
Yeah, so oftentimes when we get really good at something, we just continue to do it ourselves, right? And then it's top of mind on the fly. And so a standard operating procedure really helps you hone in on that knowledge and either put it on paper or a visual cue so those around the farm can actually lead with your direction but feel supported in doing so. And so what that would look like is if you were going out there to harvest cilantro, it would literally be all the steps involved, from showing up on the farm to grabbing the right harvest tools, to grabbing a bin, to grabbing rubber bands, having that set up, knowing where the spot is out in the field so you know where you need to harvest, having the right amount of harvest quantity you would need to rubber band, where you wear the rubber bands, how you walk the aisle. So it sounds silly, but if you are going to transport your harvested bins of whatever crop it is on a wagon or a trailer back to the barn, and you always pick it up in the middle aisle, you should always harvest to that middle aisle. That way you're not increasing the transportation and then having to carry bins back and forth. And so standard operating procedures help you detail all those steps out and then help them think through the best operational wise way to improve the process and make it the most efficient for your farm.
Okay, all right. So break down to us a bit about lean in general, because I know we just kind of hit on some topics, that I see a lot of farmers struggle with. Kind of break down the entire, what's the full aspect of lean? Yeah.
So we created a full online course program too for this, but there's 5 different phases. And within those phases, if you do the whole robust program on your farm, you go through the concerns and expectations, you draft a project charter. A project charter is basically a business plan of improvement. So what are some areas that you really think that you want to improve on your farm? And so I think that's something that most farmers go through. If it's not in their head, they do document it. What you do though is you take that and then you build an action plan implementing all the different phases of lean. So you start off with concerns and expectations. Then you start off with brainstorming on the current processes. You build some current process state maps. So what does the current process look like today for germination, for harvesting? What does that look like today, and how can we build a process map that shows us where we could focus our time for identifying the waste? Then you use tools such as 5 whys, which is, it sounds silly, but if you have kids, it's literally like, well, why? Like we had an issue of a crop getting rotten. Well, why? And so you go 5 layers deep until you get to the root cause. That way you can actually tackle the root cause of the issue and implement an improvement that is sustainable versus putting a Band-Aid fix on. When you go through the process maps, you can go through a tool called the customer value analysis, which actually helps you understand what the customer cares about. I mean, there are a lot of different movements around a farm, but it's important to think about what actually does the customer care about, what is required of you to do on the farm, and then what is something that we're doing today that is really not required. Maybe we've been doing it for years and we could probably eliminate that and build some efficiency. So you can go through a customer value analysis. Leading brainstorming sessions. And so once you get to the point of identifying root causes or improvement areas, it's important to assemble your team and start thinking about what's the best effective way to build an improvement. And it could be an idea somebody had, it could be research that you and the team go and perform and come back with a solution. And then ultimately you take that solution and you build an action plan around that. And so within that and within the program, we have all these tools in there that they can download and use. And so it goes through 8 types of waste exercise. Like there are 8 types of waste, from transportation, overproduction, overprocessing, motion, untapped talent. Like who works on your farm today that could actually do an excellent job at something, but they're doing something else today. And so how can you untap that? And so there's exercise tools out there for you to go through that. A 5S. So one of the ones that we always share with farms when we go there, if they take anything away, is 5S, which is literally you sort, set and order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And it's a simplified way of thinking where you just, from a matter of fact of sorting, you sort everything around the farm that makes the most sense, that creates flow, where there's no friction. Where is this tool? I have no idea. I have to go search for it every time. I don't know where it's at. Or are things left out in the farm and then I have to tell somebody where to go get them and they're not there and then they try to search for it again. And so how can you sort the farm to make it most effective? Setting things in order. When you get done with the tool or whatever, does it get put back in the place where it should go? So that way people can find it. Shine. How clean of the area is it? Do you find yourself stumbling around the farm, tripping over things or walking around things? And so how can you kind of shine up the farm and make it the most efficient process for you to walk through? And then sustain and standardize. The standardized piece is where you come in and do the procedural standardization, the visual aids. You make sure that you are running the efficient process that you know that you can. And then the sustain piece is everything that I've implemented on the farm. I need to make sure that I build in a sustain and management phase. And sometimes that means actually finding a farm manager or a leader on the farm to keep everybody accountable. And that's what the sustain phase would look like. The ultimate solution you get to is building a brand new process map, building effective standardization tools, and then ultimately diving into that every day with the team. So some of the farms you work with have many 10-minute huddles that they do daily when they cover some of these tasks or these projects, continuous improvement ideas that they come up with while they're out there on the farm. And so that's part of the last phase, which is the implementation and sustain.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sustain part, I'm sure, is the one that people struggle with, because it's great to get a new process and stuff, and great to have all this work, but then what happens is there's the long tail of it not being followed. So having that aspect, is important. So talk to us about some of the farms you've worked with. What are kind of some of the big breakthroughs that you've had with like the big things that improved?
Yeah, so 5S is always a big one, because a lot of the times we get so used to doing what we do, and I'm guilty of this too, right? So we just go through our day, we do it, and what happens is we get lazy sometimes on where things need to be. We get lazy on how we might want to do them. And so implementing the 5S actually keeps things running how they should. And the cool thing is even if a team member is gone and you have to bring in volunteer help, it still moves it the same way because you've built that process efficiency. And so 5S is a huge key component. Observations. So what we do is if they're not sure of whether or not they have some efficiencies they need built in, we go out to the farm and we just observe. So I take a camera and a video. I just take video. I ask questions. They go through their harvest process. I'm not out there to say, well, why do you do it that way? I'm out there to say, explain to me what you're doing. And what we're trying to do is capture the observations of what they're doing today so they can look back at it and we can have a conversation on whether or not that's the right way. Or maybe the farmer, the head farmer or the farm manager has an idea of the expectation they have in their head and it's not being done that way. And so when they see the video, the rest of their team is doing it one way and they're expecting another, and therefore you have a disconnect there. And so it helps when we go through and do the harvest process observation so we can actually build an improvement plan for the farm. The last piece is teamwork. Being able to actually spark that lean thinking curiosity. So when they're on the farm and you're inspiring them or to lead out there on the farm, giving them the tools to think, like besides them out there getting their job done, are they thinking of better ways to do it all the time? Are they bringing those ideas to the table? Are you creating opportunities for them to have conversations around that every morning through huddles, project follow-ups? Are you holding people accountable? Like if they say that they're going to do something or you have a project to work on, are you holding each other accountable and making sure you're getting that done? And so those are the 3 areas that we find the most impactful value in. Now, with that said too, when we go through the 8 types of waste, if the design or layout of the farm is not well efficient, then we notice a lot of different improvements that actually help the bottom line. So they help the cost metric, which is, how are your beds laid out? What are you putting in the soil? What's your break-even analysis? What's your cost to revenue look like? And so we have tools that measure that too, that are aligned with whatever the types of waste that we determine is on the farm. And so I would say that those are the 4 key ones.
Gotcha. While you're working with farms, how do you make sure that they're actually making progress forward? Because I mean, I'm sure you might be working with someone and they're like, well, I'm not sure if this is more efficient, or I just think that, we just needed someone to take a look at our processes and I think we're good from here on out. How do you make sure they follow through with that aspect of things?
Yeah, so most farms you work with engage in the coaching program that we offer. And so we've only had a handful that have really taken the course program and then just wanted to run with it themselves. If they want to do that, that's great. We're still here to support. But the coaching piece of it comes through sustain all the way up to 1 to 2 years. And so the farms that we're working with right now, we have a plan in place, but then as soon as they build all the efficiencies in, I have weekly touch base calls with them on Fridays where we talk through things. How's it going? How's this going? And then in a way, I kind of hold them accountable for what they say that they're going to do and how it's going with their team. And then it's meant to be that way for a full year after implementation to make sure that they don't have any questions or anything fell through the cracks that we need to go back and revisit. And so that's impactful. The tools are huge drivers for accountability. So the documents that you use, the process map tools and stuff that we provide, the different training sessions that we allow them to build. So not only do we say, hey, run 5S, we give them the tools to actually manage 5S. So you get like an Excel type spreadsheet that you go in and you can manage it through that. You get a checklist of managing it where you can assign a team leader to stay on top of that. And so the farm that we love to talk about the most, so there's an organic farm here in Ada, Michigan, that has implemented lean like crazy on their farm to the point where they have team leaders that actually have accountability with each different component of lean. Meaning if it's 5S, they hold people accountable to 5S. Every person that steps on the farm as a farm hand is trained in lean, no matter what. They're being requested to read the Lean Farming book by Ben Hartman. They're being requested to learn from their manager about what lean looks like. They talk about lean every morning. And so to be able to make it sustainable, you need to make this a culture way of life on your farm and realize those operational efficiencies.
So it's got to be buy-in from the top.
Yeah, and there's a piece actually in the program that talks about stakeholder influence. Absolutely. So everybody on the farm really has a part. And so if somebody all the way at the top is not open to improvement ideas being submitted by the farm managers or farm hands, and they ultimately have their own way of doing things, that is going to hinder the ability to make continuous improvement. So there has to be some stakeholder influence awareness of who are the influencers on the farm, and then there has to be some open conversations around what's effective. But to your point too, within the framework are baseline data tracking tools. And so besides saying, hey, implement this process and hope it works and cross your fingers, there's baseline data and tracking analysis that we build into there. So if you change a process, we take the old process, let's say it takes an hour to do, and then we time you through the new process. And then we time you as you make improvements to it. And so you actually have data to support whether or not an improvement is working. And that helps with the influencers at the top too. And so if somebody says, I think we should be pruning tomatoes a different way or whatever, to support that, you would have the data and the data tracking of the current process and then the new improved process, and then be able to share that with everybody on the farm.
Gotcha. Yeah, what else is there?
Yeah, besides lean farming, within the lean farming program that we've created, we wanted to create an opportunity for farms and professionals within their various different spaces to be able to create courses on there. And so one thing I'll share, and it kind of ties into lean, but like I have a professional writing coach that was in the writing industry for 25 and a half years, is writing how to write thoughtful content, because we know like social media content, Instagram, Facebook, newsletters, blogs, we all feel like we have to do it, right, to stay relevant.
Yeah.
But how could we equip you with the right tools to be thoughtful about it? Like, how can you write very succinct posts that don't take you hours to do, that are very thoughtful to the people you're trying to reach? And so we have a person that's going to write a course about that. That kind of ties into operational efficiencies. A lot of the great stuff that you guys do, very similar, right? Any type of tool that actually support building in any type of lean methods to help operational efficiencies.
So talk to us a little bit more about, when you're working with farms on lean, what are some of the areas that you see the most time trimmed? It sounds like harvest was a big one, but do you also see on the other side? So just talk to us like some of the processes and some of the ways that you've seen of shine for working through problems.
Yeah, CSA is a huge one. And by CSA, I mean everything encompassing. I mean CSA field management. How does it look like when you're out there harvesting the CSA, all the way to what does it look like for a CSA drop off? Like what happens when you go through the wash and pack? you put it in the bins. And then if you have a drive-through process, you have a pickup process, we track all of that. And that is where we see the most amount of time efficiencies built in, because most of the times we're harvesting, putting it in bins, getting it ready, and then putting it in a format that the customer can come pick it up. What we're not thinking about is what's the most efficient way to do that? Like, what's the most efficient way to put it in a bin, or does it go in a cold storage room? How do we get it out? Who helps us manage it? How does the customer process work? And so CSA program seems to be a big hit, depending on the size of your CSA program that you run, as far as operational efficiencies go. The other part is the design of the farm. And so whenever you have people come out, and let's say, like, we called it harvesting, but I like to call it an end-to-end approach, right? Because you come out and there's typically a lot of things that are happening on a farm. It's not just everybody's harvesting and only harvesting. And so what we try to do is, if we have a bunch of different subsets of maps, we put them all together and create one time frame. And then within that, we figure out where the most time is being spent and whether or not that can be improved. And so it could be as far as, like, people come on the farm and they're setting up the wash pack station for the day. There's people out in the field getting ready to harvest in bins. There's people that are transporting it back to the cold storage room. And so we measure that entire process from end to end. And then we usually find that there's a particular area on each farm that they struggle with doing efficiently. And so we focus in on that area. Not to say that we won't come back, and if they're excellent at harvesting, that we won't come back and look at different methods, but we'll focus on what is most necessary to improve.
Yeah. Gotcha. So let's talk about weeds and lean. What are you seeing some lean methods for controlling weeds on the farm?
Yeah. Flame weeding is a huge one that comes up, pretty popular. Besides that, what you'll see in so on the lean farming program too, there are farms across country that submitted videos to us. So it's not necessarily just me writing the program and everything. There are farms out there that are implementing lean and then being able to display that for you. And so I think that's valuable to a farmer, because they're like, well, okay, this sounds great, but how is this being applied? And so we're aware of, like, using the tarps in the early seasons to keep the weeds out. That's a common one for a lot of the farms, and you'll see that video on there too. Those are the two common ones that come up. A lot of questions come up around pest control, as far as if you don't have the right setup for fencing and to keep pests out and everything, what are the best methods for that? And so what we tried to build is a resource log within the lean farming of people that have different methods and practices that they use to keep pest control out, especially when you can't build a fence around your entire area.
Gotcha. And when you say a resource log, you mean like a conglomerated different people and what they're doing?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, if there's expertise in your area and you want to write a course about it, we allow you to do that and then share it on the program. And so there are farms across the country that are interested in sharing their methods. And so they create a little mini course, and then we house it on the lean farming program for farmers across the country to access, so that they can learn different ways.
Very, very, very cool. So talk to us a little bit more about the Farm Brigge side of things, the capacities of the program, and why are you trying to get farms on to there to sign up? Yeah. So we built this to be an all-encompassing marketing tool and resource tool. And so I alluded to earlier that, farms can sign up, list their profile. Their profile actually shares everything we learned through customer research, which is anytime somebody's looking for a farm, what are they looking for? And so on your profile, not only will you include a bio, you can create and post jobs if you are hiring for the farm. And it doesn't have to be part-time and full-time. It could be work share. It could be internships. And so you can create those and put those on your profile. There's attributes on there about your growing practice, what you grow. Do you offer farm tours, CSAs? Do you work with restaurants? And so all those attributes are on your profile. But the best part is when you sign up, you get a dashboard of tools. And so you have access to the lean farming program. You have a messaging system to communicate with customers or other farms on there, even just through the contact messaging system. You can create the jobs. You can associate yourself to markets. You can add products for sale. And so we built in a very, I wouldn't call it a well-sophisticated model, because we're still learning, and we are partnering with Local Line to help with their resources and everything too.
But we created a way where farms can add products on there, and then they can sell them through a purchase order system. And then the cool part is we're trying to build up a resource log. And so we have growing farmers access resources under the dashboard as thriving farmers. We have Local Lines digital book on there. We have USDA link out to financial aid resources. We working with AgriAbility for mental health resources that they can access on there. They have 2 other organizations we're working with to add there, including Miedema Auctioneering, which is a well-known company that helps with auction tools for selling old equipment or tools that you don't need anymore, or looking to buy equipment and tools. And so there will be a resource on there. And so also within there, we heard that the one thing that farms sometimes struggle with is hiring and retaining farm workers. And so whether you get work help or volunteer help or school or students help, you often lose that, and then you have to start over again. And so that's why we created the job post and sharing, but we also created a way for farm workers to sign up and build a profile, almost like a LinkedIn format. And so from the farm dashboard page, you'll see at the top where it says Find Farm Help, you can search a database of farm workers and their profiles. It says the bio, the things they're good at, what they want to do, do they want to relocate, their preferred way of payment. And so we're building that up. We're working with organizations like Migrant Legal Aid and everything to start building up that resource for the farming community. But then ultimately too, and also there's a consumer dashboard and a farmers markets dashboard. But what I also want to talk about is the mission behind why we built all this, because the why we built this is we realized there's a tremendous opportunity to take data points around the local food system and use that to influence policy implementation and budget spending. And so with all the different points that we're trying to capture and all the different users on this marketplace platform, we are using that data to help influence spending to the institutional level, to the restaurant spending, to the large distributors. Like we know we have a large distributor headquartered right here in West Michigan that we know that the farms that we support, they don't work with. So that means every time that they distribute goods to a restaurant or a store and all that, we know that it's not coming from our farms. And so we thought this is a tremendous opportunity to not only learn what people are searching for, who's growing where it's growing, the quantity that's available, like how many farms are growing spinach within the area, and then how much could that support the community that they need? So does that support 10 restaurants in the area and 5 schools? And so we want to capture all those data points and then take that, and one of the organizations we're working with is the Center for Good Food Purchasing on the East Coast. And so they've already built awesome policy implementation tools where all they need is the data to support it, and then an openness from the municipalities and the counties to implement the programs. And so we're going to work with them with those data points to help them go across the country and help implement those solutions to help improve not only spending within restaurants, stores, and commercial spaces, but what's most important too is in schools. We want to make sure that farm to school programs like that and institutional spending around healthy food is top of mind. And that's what we hope to do with all the different data points we're capturing.
Very cool. Yeah, that's going to be really helpful. And I think the other thing too, like I was talking to George, who's a farmer I work with here locally, but we were just throwing back and forth harvest numbers, how many pounds of this or beds of this or bunches can you get from one bed? And like, we're trying to figure out what the collaboration is with other local farmers, because again, obviously it's nationwide average, but also trying to get regional averages too. And so that's going to be really helpful to kind of work that back and forth. So,
yeah. And I would, at least from my perspective, it's really hard to understand that these days. Like if somebody were to say, is there enough sweet potato production in Michigan to support the stores, like the Myers, the Walmarts, the Costco's, and then the restaurants that enjoy the food? Is there enough sweet potato production to support that? And we don't really have that data. We don't have that understanding, nor could we influence that. Meaning, if we are capable of growing that, and we know that we can, then why wouldn't we use that data to also implement the growing practice? Meaning, if you have acreage on your farm, or you're considering growing something different because today you grow all predominantly greens and you're starting to notice a trend in less people purchasing greens, why wouldn't you be open to doing a field of sweet potatoes if you knew that there were people and the demand in there that the stores would automatically buy from you, the restaurants would automatically buy from you, and there would be a demand from schools and stuff? And so there are many different ways that we can use this data to not only help farmers think about what to grow, but also to influence the spending on what is bought.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and if folks do have questions, feel free to post those in the chat. I don't think we've had any come in so far, but yeah, if you guys have questions for Troy on all things lean, feel free to put that in there. Troy, what would you say for someone listening tonight who's excited now to go home and implement lean? What are like 3 things they can start doing tomorrow on their farm to start putting this into practice?
Yeah. So again, the lean 5S, but I think ultimately it starts with the mindset. And what I mean by mindset too is to think lean means that you have to start thinking about every process on your farm and whether or not it's valuable to do. And then if you struggle with that typical concept, then you say, well, does the customer care about this? Because if the customer doesn't care about it, then you should walk the line down. Well, if it's required for me to do, then I don't think I can cut it. If it's not required for you to do and the customer doesn't care about it, it's probably an area that you can improve. And so if you just go through those simple questions to start thinking about where you want to start. The next piece is come up with a plan. Like I would almost every farm that we've worked with has already had an idea of things that are headaches, right? That they're like, I just hate doing this, or I really struggle with this. And they think about improving it, and then maybe it doesn't happen, maybe it does. And so get those things down on paper and then start to think about building a plan around it. The last piece I'll leave with is the lean farming program that we created. The whole course program is listed as $89, but anybody that signs up and builds a profile on FarmBrig in 2020 gets the whole program for free, and everybody on their farm can access the materials for free. And so if they really truly want to get started, if they just sign up on FarmBrig, they'll get an email from me, and then everybody on the entire farm gets access to the program, and they can start using that right away.
Okay, well, there's an offer you can't refuse. So get on there, sign up, and yeah, start implementing. It's something that we see when we work with farms. Obviously, we work a lot more holistically, so we're working with a lot of different sides of things, but that lean aspect, the efficiency aspect is always something that there's always an aspect of that we bring in. If it's maybe, from transplant production to the harvest production. And sometimes the advice to some of these folks is actually, you shouldn't be doing this at all. That should be outsourced. And so it's a cost of goods sold instead of trying to do the process yourself. Like one of our very successful farms down in South Carolina, or I think North Carolina, the first entire year, they didn't grow a transplant themselves. They bought every single one in from a local company they were able to work out really well with. And that allowed them to, scale super large and not have to think about that whole aspect of things. So basically, trays of transplants came in, they set them outside for 2 or 3 days to harden off, and they planted them.
Yeah, that's effective. I know there are farms in our area too that they know that they're really good at growing like 5 things, right? Yep. And then they start to get traction with customers, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, maybe we should either grow more of what we have, or we start to grow something different and start testing and playing around. And what we try to caution them with is, well, is that the best way? Because if you have 2 or 3 farms around you and they're growing crops that people care about, what are your thoughts on partnering with them and bringing that into your farm site, right? Whether you have a mini farm store right there on site in your barn, or you want to include it in your CSA package, it doesn't mean that you're not still a grower. You are still an excellent grower, right? It just means that you're trying to get the customer what they want on the one site location, and there's no reason why you can't leverage other people's expertise to do so.
Yeah, I think too long we've had this, I don't know if it's like a point of pride or just this belief that if I want to sell it, I need to grow it.
Yep.
I think that's a huge mistake. I mean, if you can find other growers that you know, like, and trust, and that you're comfortable with, then just you grow what you're good at, let them grow what they're good at, and and go from there. Because it's good. Again, it's lean. I guess the next question to you, I think it would be more lean to grow 5 crops at a larger scale than 55, and struggle to figure out the specific aspects of every single crop.
Yeah, because you have to think about what that all comes with. The questions, the uncertainties. Like, as soon as you start to do something different, you have to spend an ample amount of time on figuring out how to make it work. And so as soon as you introduce that, you have to be willing to spend the time. And from a lean perspective, you should be doing what makes sense, what creates flow. And we're not telling you to don't explore. I mean, obviously, like you're a farmer, like put something on the ground and try to explore a little bit, but don't completely shift the way that you're doing things and then retool your entire operation to a point where you're no longer efficient anymore, or you're no longer profitable because you've implemented all these costs. And so there's always a mindful approach, and I totally agree with that. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you have to kind of question yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a farm a couple states over that, used to be mixed CSA, and then last year decided to go 100% into hemp.
Yep.
And the problem is that there was no buyer. The buyer backed out, or everything happened. Everything happened. That was just, and so it almost pretty much put them out of business because they had hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up into all this biomass. And this year they tried to go back to growing vegetables, and then they got hit with some Derico or something, which a big windstorm, and that was the nail in the coffin. So I
think, I mean, what I often like to talk about too is sometimes when we think about farming, we don't think about it as entrepreneurship. Yeah. What it is, it's entrepreneurship. And so when you're out there thinking about those things, like dabble. Like if you want to start a hemp farm, like why not use a certain plot and start to grow it, and then gauge a customer's interest and start to grow that way and be like, all right, well, now I can get this contract, or now I can think about the process of turning it into a CBD oil with a distributor nearby or whatever. And so start to build that out slowly while you're running your well-oiled machine of what you have, and then see it grow from there, and then make a decision. And so I only offer that because, well, we're both in the space, Michael, of entrepreneurship, as well as all the farmers out there. And it's very tempting to do that, but it can be very valuable to kind of lead your foot in with one step at a time sometimes.
Yeah. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Yeah. Michael says purchasing transplant doesn't work for specialty growers. Michael, I'm going to challenge you on that, because absolutely, you can get pretty much any variety from the Johnny's Gallagher or any one of these varieties custom grown by these companies that they grow transplants for a living. Banner Greenhouse is a hugely popular one in the South. We actually this year, looked into some of them for some of the stuff that we needed, but ended up finding it local here. But your other farmers around you too might be able to find it too. So George, the farmer I work with, we're actually in talks for him to produce a fair amount of transplants we're going to need next year, just because of he grows it really, really well. He's got a big greenhouse for that. And, he wants me to grow his winter squash. And so I'm going to be like, well, if you want me to grow your winter squash, which we're good at, then we will, you're going to have to do some transplants for us. So there's all sorts of partnerships that I feel can be made. And too often we're in our own little silo, and we're not thinking about the bigger picture, making that improvement plan, as you said, Troy, from the beginning, of like, where's this map of what needs to be improved or changed on our farm to actually make us a profitable, productive farm?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things out there in our farms today that we, if we just dissected, we probably would understand what actually works and what doesn't. Sometimes it gets masked. If it's a small production crop and we kind of build it into the process, then we kind of overlook it. But that could be an area where you grow more of what you're great at, versus just shifting or abandoning completely. You start planting more what you're already good at. And so it's the same type of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Troy, any final thoughts before we end for the night?
I really appreciate you having me. If anything, just being able to challenge everybody on your farm to just think a little bit differently every day will start to surface things like operational waste and everything like that. And so if we can help out at all, there is on the Lean Farming program a little mini coaching course that shares what that looks like. And right now, we'll give you a 1-hour coaching consult, which means we'll help you walk through that project charter. We'll help you develop that improvement plan, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can choose to engage in more. You can choose to take the course, or you can choose to take that and run with it on your farm. And so, but we want to do our part in helping. So if you want to get started and you're curious, please do reach out. Would love to have that conversation and help you think through a plan.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think too, Troy, leverage your team. If you do have a team on your farm, leverage those folks to get them involved, get them improving this, because a lot of the time the crew has fabulous ideas and sometimes they feel like they're not allowed to be heard. And so just, be open for that. Let people share their thoughts, because there's a lot of talent, as you said earlier, usually untapped. The team can handle things. So
yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to reach out to your fellow farmers too, right? There are some that are very good at this. And it's worth it to leverage that. I know that, like Green Wagon that I mentioned on this call here, that I reach out to often to see how things are going, and I offer up, if they're open to it, to connect them to other farms, because I know that sometimes farms like to hear from other managers or other farmers on how well it's working and how they can implement it. And so leverage that too. Leverage across, not in addition to within the farm.
absolutely. All right. Well, Troy, thanks so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoyed this. And again, follow up with Troy. It's FarmBrig.com, and that's BRIGG with an E at the end, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So FarmBrigge.com. All right, Troy. Have a great, everyone. Thanks so much for coming on, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.